And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and as always, next to me is my beautiful co-host Laraib. As we are super excited to break down one of the craziest weeks of this season so far, Week 7 of the NFL season. Tons of upsets, tons of crazy games that we could not have predicted. A career low, but we'll get into that one. Speaking of, Robbie, anything you want to say before we hop into these picks?
Yeah, just quick shout out to the Butler fam for inviting me over to the Saints game for your birthday. That was just great to see everybody at the tailgate, meeting everybody. A lot of love from you guys in the podcast, so appreciate the support and all of your feedback. But let's go ahead and get into the picks, Lewis. Like you mentioned, just an awful week for both of us, really. But for me, a 4-point stinker. Lowest in first and goal history, which is
man,
awful to see. I mean, even on a short week, or excuse me, not a short week, just a lot of teams on bye, still, 4 points is god awful. Neither my lock nor my upset hit, and that was that.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm looking at these picks, you could even argue that Cleveland should have lost. Like, that's how bad. I mean, that's one of the few we got right. Thankfully, I got my lock and my upset right, and that was the only games we differed on. I hit both of those. But man, I mean, ugly, ugly week filled with a ton of upsets, Rob. But let's go ahead and let's start with last night's game, Monday Night Football, where we had the Minnesota Vikings take down the 49er juggernauts 22-17, Rob. Crazy, crazy game. Tons of big plays, tons of head-scratching plays. Where do you want to start from this game?
I want to start with the 49ers defense, Lewis. Now, of course, we talk about their offense, a lot of guys getting hurt, but their defense really wasn't missing too many guys or missing anyone at all. And still, they get shown up on Monday Night Football. Kirk Cousins, over 370 passing yards in this Vikings team, over 400 yards on offense. And they just looked anemic out there, to be honest. Their secondary is getting exposed, 0 sacks on Kirk Cousins. I mean, it was just ridiculous to see this Vikings offense pick apart this 49ers defense after struggling against the Bears last week. And coming into this game, we thought, the 49ers would still just blow this team out of the water like we've seen Kirk Cousins in prime time. Maybe he's beaten those primetime allegations, Lewis.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it was a really bad, the 49ers coming off a really physical game against the Browns. It was tough to bounce back. No Trent Williams, no Deebo Samuel. But you make the argument, Larob, we talked about Brock Purdy and the discussion around him, and the discussion about evaluating quarterbacks in general has been flipped on its head this season because of Brock. And it's like, Brock's playing really well. How do you fault him? What do you want him to do? And we were both sitting here saying, it's not what we haven't seen or have seen. We just want to see more. We want to see him in normal quarterback situations that quarterbacks on normal NFL teams go through. And when you're missing guys, when you're trailing in games, when there's adversity, how do you respond? And we saw last week, Brock Purdy, when he was down, he led his team all the way down the field, couldn't get him close enough, kicker missed a field goal, whatever. This week, 2 drives, they're down a score with a chance to win the game or get the lead, and in both chances, he throws a pick. And now we're saying, hey, maybe it's more of Shanahan. Maybe Mr. Irrelevant isn't as relevant as we thought. So there's a lot of questions arising about how do we gauge Brock Purdy as a quarterback? Is he all of a sudden a bad quarterback? No. He made multiple throws in that game that show that he can run this offense and he can be excellent in this offense. But it's just, if everything's not going right, can you trust him in a big setting, a big primetime game, a playoff game potentially coming down the road? Are you going to trust him in that spot against another elite quarterback who you do trust? And that's a big question. So this is a big point in Brock Purdy's season right now. You're halfway through the season, basically, and you can go the way of, that was 2 bad games. I'm going to bounce back. I'm going to play better. Or defenses have figured me out, because now we have basically a full season of film on Brock Purdy. Our defense is just figuring him out. I don't think so. I think this offense will be fine just because they have so much talent. Trent Williams, Deebo Samuel, they will be back. But you go through adversity in this league, and you can say, oh, I need to see him go through more, and maybe he just needs more reps, more experience. I mean, this is a 4-year, 5-year starter in college. And he has experience. He has a lot of reps. We know what he can do. You're not going to get much more out of Brock Purdy than we expect. So in this spot, I'm a little skeptical heading down for the 49ers Super Bowl chances of whether or not Brock Purdy in a big spot will be able to deliver, Laraib.
Yeah, like you mentioned, he's had some great throws, especially with the timing, right? Whenever the receivers are breaking out, he has the timing down perfectly. But like you mentioned, whenever, you're never been down, you lost your first 2 games last 2 weeks. You never had to have a game winning drive. You never had to, try to, have a game winning drive down the field against a defense that's kind of had your number all night. And now, like you mentioned, he's at a crossroads right here. Is he going to try to learn? Because, you don't learn without making mistakes. And so
Right.
is he going to take these 2 game losing drives as an opportunity to learn, or is he going to continue to falter? Like you mentioned, of course, with this 49ers offense, they're going to make it really easy for him, even without Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams. So we'll see how they continue to climb. But as a Seahawks fan, I'm loving this downfall of Brock Purdy because this just gives us a chance to continue to have a shot to win that division. And so we'll see.
Laura, who's better, Brock Purdy or Geno Smith?
This is on the spot type of question. Now, I will say
I think it's an easy answer. I think it's Geno. That's just me though.
So what I've seen out of Geno so far this season has been some inconsistencies. Last year, of course, comeback player of the year, just had an outstanding season. But so far this year, I have not liked what I've seen out of the offensive showing from the Seahawks the past 2 weeks. We talk about red zone struggles, and no team has struggled as much in the red zone as the Seahawks, as well as the Cowboys or the Cowgirls. And so it's just going to be trying to figure that stuff out. But if you take veteran experience, just time in the league, of course you have to give it to Geno. But I think Brock Purdy is still on his climb, just a second year in the league. And so as he starts to develop more and more, we'll see, where that goes from there. But let's move on to another team that struggled this week, the Miami.
Well, real quick, Larob, I want to throw something at you before we jump off this game. And it pertains to Minnesota because Minnesota leading the league in turnovers, really rough start to the season, 2-4 entering this game. And they lose Justin Jefferson. A lot of people have just written them off. But you saw what the offense was able to do. The defense with Brian Flores, they're starting to kind of get into a rhythm, Larob. I want to ask you, can this Vikings team make the playoffs? And before you answer, I want to roll through the schedule with you real quick, at least their next 6 games. At Packers, at Falcons, home for the Saints, at the Broncos, home for the Bears, at the Raiders. Those are a lot of winnable games on their schedule going forward. And only being 3-4 with a lot of football left, this team that, they're losing all these one-score games after they won so many last year. Kirk Cousins played arguably his best game of his Vikings career last night. So to think that maybe they could get some momentum following this game isn't a crazy thing to ask. So real quick, what is your opinion on that?
I agree with you. If you look at the rest of the division, I still like the Lions to win it, but the Packers, after their hot start, have not looked good. The Bears, of course, they pull out a win against the Raiders, but still with a rookie quarterback and Justin Fields hurt, it looks like they might not have a great shot. And then you look at the rest of the NFC. I mean, goddamn, I like the Buccaneers, Lewis, but against that Falcons game, there's 2 mid teams just having a mid off. I mean, no one else is really starting to, emerge in this NFC picture. We talk about it and before, during the preseason, this NFC is really top heavy, right? You have the Eagles, the 49ers, and maybe, the Lions as the 3 contenders. But for everyone else, it's wide open. And so if this Vikings team, like you mentioned, has an easy schedule going forward, can start to rip off some wins, build some momentum, they easily could make the playoffs.
And I mean, you could argue maybe besides Jared Goff so far, maybe Jalen Hurts, Kirk Cousins has been playing like the best quarterback in the entire NFC. It's just been the fumbles and the timely turnovers that have been screwing this team. And a lot of that is on him. But last night, after that first pick, which was really just, a great play by the cornerback, he played perfect football. And if you're interested, Laura, Vikings plus 470 for the division. I don't know.
I don't like that. I don't like that one, to be honest.
Okay. You know what? After what I saw from Detroit last week, it's worth a glance. That's all I'll say. All right, Laura, but what you were alluding to earlier, the game we're going to move on to, the Sunday night game, speaking of a struggling offense, the Miami Dolphins, 2 losses on the season against the only 2 teams with winning records on their schedule so far, Laura. Are the Dolphins fraudulent?
It's difficult to say at this point, but I'm leaning towards yes. Now they do get Jalen Ramsey back in the defense, and of course Xavier Howard. But it's that offense, Lewis, when they face semi decent defenses and they can't run the ball, they get heavily exposed. We know they love to do the pre snap motion. Of course, Tyreek Hill is good for one deep bomb touchdown a game. But besides that, when this offensive line has some pressure on them, it's been really difficult for Tua back there in that pocket.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest concern for me is this offensive line because you're down Teron Armstead, Connor Williams is out, so you have a different center come in. And then we saw they lost their left guard. His name is escaping me at the moment, but he went down in that Philly game as well. And we know this season rides on Tua's health. And with all these injuries, he took 3 sacks at the end of that game trying to come back. You just have to wince and look and just like, it's an ugly scene looking at Tua and what could come because those are the thoughts that immediately enter your head when you see him get sacked and get tackled. And with this offensive line, my thing with the Dolphins is they have the ability to just destroy a team who doesn't know what's coming. If you're an NFC team or a team that you really never see the Dolphins or experience that speed, you're going to get destroyed. But you see they go into Philadelphia against that well-coached, really seasoned defensive line with some really exciting young players on it as well. And they feasted. And you mentioned if they aren't able to run the ball, that's what their entire offense is predicated around. It's getting that outside zone running game going and then running all the RPO action off of it. And that sets up the down to field shots. That's going to, like you said, you're probably going to get one a game to Tyreek Hill, and that's going to be great for you. But you can't rely on that. It's not a sustainable offense come November, December, January, February football. That's when you need to have a mauling offensive line, a run straight running game, not a run outside running game, because it's not sustainable. That's how you get offensive linemen injured through all these, complicated movements. They go forward, they go backwards. They don't go side by side. Trust me, I was an offensive line. I hated running. They don't like running either because that's how, you fall. Someone falls on your leg whenever you're making big strides and everything. But I just don't know if this is a sustainable offense with Tua at the helm, Laraib. And I think Devon Achane provided a lot of spark early on in the season. And without him, Raheem Mostert's been all right. But against teams with good defensive lines, good front sevens, I just don't think this will be a competitive team come deep in the playoffs, Laraib.
Yeah, and a big thing they lost during this offseason was tight end Mike Gesicki, right? He really opened up the intermediate to short game for that offense. And now, you have speed, speed kills. But when you don't have time to sit back in the pocket and you don't have the ability to kind of make the defense come down in that short game, it makes it really difficult. Now, we've seen them light up against the Carolina Panthers, right? We've seen them light up the Denver Broncos defense. But like you mentioned, when you're playing in this AFC division, it's not going to be those teams you're going to be playing. You're going to be playing the Ravens come playoff time. You're playing the Bills secondary come playoff time. And even this Chiefs defense, which has played really well so far this season, it's going to be those type of defenses you face this year. And so if you don't have the ability to, attack all 3 levels of the field, short, medium, and deep, and only can go deep, then it's going to be a struggle for this Dolphins team.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to say on the other side of the ball, you put so many resources in, it can't just be, oh, we plan on Jalen Ramsey being a huge part of this offense. Now, yes, A.J. Brown destroyed Coho on the outside, who did not look like he was in A.J. Brown's league. But even on the inside, I mean, you use draft picks on a guy like Bradley Chubb. You have a guy like Christian Wilkins, a Jalen Phillips on this defensive line that's you're hyping up. You're saying this is a defensive line that can get after the quarterback in huge stake playoff games. And I just don't see it. I don't see the juice. I don't see the special with this defensive line like I see with teams like the Chiefs with the Chris Jones, like the Ravens with the Roquan Smith, in the middle. I don't see special in that front seven like I do with some of the more elite teams in the AFC. And that was the Bills as well. But, Von Miller doesn't look like himself. And Matt Milano's gone for the year. So we're seeing these teams where if your middle of your defense is weak, you're going to be a weak defense in general. You can't just rely on a guy like Jalen Ramsey, an older cornerback coming off a pretty big injury, to come and save your defense. So they need to figure out on that side of the ball. Vic Fangio, a very, well-traveled, well-seasoned, well-respected defensive coordinator. I think he'll be able to do something come playoff time or come, into the season time. But so far, they need to figure out that side of the ball as well.
Yeah, for sure, Lewis. But let's go ahead and move on to your Saints. Now, after a disappointing loss while we were at the game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. How are you feeling about this Saints season so far?
I mean, I went into the season with low expectations because, when you have a long off season, you're getting hyped for the football season. The past few years for the Saints, as the offseason started to end, I got more and more excited as I heard stuff from training camp, as I heard stuff from rookies. But this offseason was different. As the time passed, I got more and more pessimistic. The more I looked at Derek Carr as a jag, just a guy. And the more, I just like another year with Dennis Allen. Is that supposed to excite me? The defensive line got gutted. We didn't really bring anyone exciting. And it was just like looking at a team that the only hope in being better is this offense being so much more elevated than it was with guys like Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston to now Derek Carr. But what have I ever seen from Derek Carr to make me believe that he is the guy who can lead this team to any significance? And I know it's distressing to say, and it's kind of a bad way to look at it, but if my team's not going to win the Super Bowl, I don't care for my team. That's not my point. There's a lot of teams in this league who don't have any shot at winning the Super Bowl this year, but they're going in the right direction, Laraib. You look at this division, and I think the worst mistake for this Saints team was looking at the rest of the division and saying, you know what? Let's go all in. We can win this division this year. Let's go for it. No, because then what? So you win the division. Now you have a worse draft pick, and like all these players, you're gonna have to pay because, oh, I just won the division for you, and then they just get older, less valuable, and you get smoked. You don't have any. If you're trying to make the playoffs, you're trying to win the Super Bowl, and this roster has no Super Bowl expectations. And I'm not even saying it's all on Derek Carr. I'm saying there's holes all over the roster. This offensive line is shoddy. The receivers, I applauded them, but I think it's probably just like a B+ room. There's no special talent in that receiver room. And I thought Olave was that guy, but I just don't think he's yet. I don't think he is that type of guy. And there's effort questions. Now we have all this off the field stuff. So I think the Saints, there need to be major changes this either during the season or definitely during the offseason. It has to start at Dennis Allen. I really like Dennis Allen as a defensive mind. I think he brings the most out of his secondary players where he, has flourished the best. I think he is a great defensive mind. He's a respected defensive mind. And I would love him back in New Orleans in that role, but he's just not a head coach type of guy. We need new blood. And honestly, you just need to flush the swamp. Get rid of all the Drew Brees, Sean Payton remnants, guys like Cam Jordan, Demario Davis. I love you, and I'd love to have veterans in this locker room, but let's look for greener pastures. We need to move on. We need to flush this dead cap. We need to take it on the chin, get rid of all the salary cap, and move on, because I am tired of watching a great 2018 team just slowly deteriorate year after year after year, and we're not doing anything. We're just saying, or maybe we'll be back to that. You're never going to get back to that. There's no Peyton. There's no Breeze. You need to move on.
And I highly, highly disagree with everything that you said, Lewis. We were just talking about this Vikings team, how now at 3-4, their easy schedule coming up, they have the opportunity to make the playoffs and maybe be frisky. And this Saints team has the same exact ability to do that, Lewis. You're talking about one of the easier schedules in the NFL going forward. You're talking about a division that's highly winnable after we watch that.
Can we throw out the easiest schedule? Because we're a bad team. We don't win games we're supposed to. I don't care if we're only playing the Buccaneers for the rest of the season. We aren't good. They're looking at us saying, oh, we play the Saints. Like, we need to throw that moniker out of the window. And if I'm a Vikings fan, honestly, I'm probably in the same boat. Kirk Cousins is an unrestricted free agent next season. What are you getting out of this season? If they want some, but I think their roster is more talented and they have young players to look forward to. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Ivan Pace on the defensive side. What do we have to look forward to as Saints fans? That's my perspective. You need to be going in a positive direction.
You have a seasoned group of defensive players who's been a top 5 defense this year, Lewis. You have an offense that's been built around Chris Olave, Michael Thomas. Now, I will say Chris Olave is kind of afraid to get hit. I mean, as a football player, I've seen him, go down early, try to duck his head down so he doesn't get it ripped by a middle linebacker. I've seen him drop balls, and I've not seen him give any effort. But all that will change when they continue to develop in this offense. Now, I will say, Pete Carmichael, you got to go, brother. I mean, goddamn, what you talk about an offense as Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, and Chris Olave, and you still struggle to score points. I mean, it's kind of crazy. But you talk about how the Saints are what other teams are looking at as easy on the schedule. But I mean, you still have to play the Bears,
Loss,
the Giants,
loss,
the Panthers again. I mean,
win.
there's opportunities. There's opportunities for the Saints team to start racking up some wins, and this NFC is wide open. And the NFL is not all about Super Bowls, Lewis. Sometimes it's about making the playoffs, getting that extra revenue from fans coming into the stadium,
getting fat and happy and lazy. That's what it's about.
And enjoying the game and causing a ruckus. And so
lazy, le bon temps roulé.
I'm still riding with this Saints team. Derek Carr's got something to prove after getting his bag. And I think the Saints team racks up a couple wins, just like this Vikings team, like you mentioned earlier, and sneak into the playoffs.
Now, if we beat the Colts next week, I'll be right back with you. I'm just telling you that right now. But you can't lose on my birthday, damn it. That's just a cardinal sin. Anyway, let's move on, Laraib, to a more exciting team. The Baltimore Ravens crushed the Lions at home, 38 points against this Lions. We were hyping up the Lions. We were hyping them up going into this week. And maybe it's just the theme of this year. We talked about it before, Laraib. The team with the most hype falls the flattest on their face. We thought it was the Browns, but they barely beat the Colts last week. But maybe it was the Lions who, had a huge win. People are like, hey, they might be the 1 seed in the NFC. Then they run into the Ravens buzzsaw. And Lamar Jackson, Laraib, has really, really impressed me this season. I think that he's gone super under the radar with his production this season. He doesn't have the gaudiest passing numbers, but he's just such a value. Like, what he brings to an offense is so valuable, and he never gets flustered in the pocket. He's so athletic. He's able to escape, move. But I just like the plays he makes, escaping defenders, juking back, getting his feet set, and hitting guys wide open because you cause so much havoc, so much chaos in the defense that guys are just running wide open all across the field. What he's been able to do, and him and Todd Monken, slow start to the year, but what we saw them do in that Lions game was perfection. Laraib, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you could say Lamar Jackson just has a different aura about him this season.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, we know his legs are his primary resource, but in this game, Lewis, only 4 rush attempts. And this big thing was sitting back in the pocket. Now, there was one play where he had over 5 seconds just creating time in the pocket, and then he hit somebody wide open in the end zone for a touchdown. And they even mentioned on the broadcast, so it's, normal, Lamar Jackson of years past, he's tucking that ball, he's running that thing.
Yeah.
And, we've seen some great development out of him so far this season. Now, I will say, the past 2 years, he's struggled finishing the season, Lewis. There's been some nagging injuries. Of course, he missed a playoff game last year against the Bengals. And so it's going to be more on him to protect himself. Like we said already, he's been great in the pocket. And so we'll see how he continues to develop as a passer this season, and how they try to utilize him maybe less and less in that rush game and more as a passer.
See, I disagree, because last year you can argue that he didn't have his money. There was no guaranteed contract coming, and he wanted to protect himself. Now that he has his money, that he has the freedom to go out and play his hardest, I think he's letting it loose. I think he's, maybe playing through some stuff. I'm not saying he is now, but like towards the end of the season, he'll be there. It seems like when some guys get money, that's when they like to chill. That's like when they like to say, I've made it, I'm good. Lamar Jackson has a different aura about him. When he gets his money, he says, now I can play free. Now I can do whatever I want. Now I have the power in my hands to run my type of offense. And he's just, making so many strides, so many steps. And he's still so young. He's 25 years old, Laraib. So much more growth. He might be Brock Purdy's age. I don't know. But, I mean, the growth we've seen from Lamar this season, is he your MVP favorite?
No. It has to be Patrick Mahomes, just what he's been doing over there in Kansas City. Now, this Ravens team, of course, has always been underreported in the AFC, because you're always talking about big old Josh Allen at 6'5". You're talking about Patrick Mahomes, 2-time Super Bowl winner over there. But Lamar Jackson, I think we'll see some more light shed on him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Mahomes is probably the MVP favorite right now. Just, what he's done, the record of the team, everything like that, his track record. But Lamar definitely has a good shot to win it here down the stretch. So I'm giving him a chance. But we're talking about some of the best teams in the league. Now it's time to put our money where our mouth is, Laraib. Top 5 teams in the NFL. We're going to rank them from 1 to 5 right now, as of week 7, who we think are the top 5 teams in the NFL. Rob, who is your number 1 team in the NFL?
I think you and I can both agree it has to be the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yep.
After that little slip up on opening day, they've just been right back on track. Travis Kelce has been on another outstanding year. Him and Patrick Mahomes have an outstanding connection. And really, we've talked about this all year long. It's been that defense, which we know likes to step it up, and the later half of the season has been on a tear to start the season this year. And so you got to have them number 1.
Yeah, they have not allowed a 20-point game from an opponent yet. Now, Detroit scored 21, but they also had a pick 6. So this defense has been playing very good this season. They're young, they're fast, they're all over. They forced a ton of fumbles this season. So I think this is a very complete team. You can argue the most complete team of Mahomes' career, because you have a guy like Pacheco, who's a solid running back, really getting extra yards in short down situations. The receivers, they're getting there. Rashee Rice has been impressing me so far. And Travis Kelce is still Travis Kelce. So I agree with you. They're my number 1 team, and they look scary right now. My number 2 team, Laraib, and we may still be on the same page, is the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the Eagles, it doesn't seem like we disagree or we agree, but I'll let you get to that next. I think the Eagles, we have questions about this offense. No Shane Steichen, Jalen Hurts, not really playing well this season, but they just have the best formula in the entire league, and that's their running game. That's their quarterback tush push play, which has kind of taken on a whole different identity this season. It's so unstoppable. It just deflates teams. And we saw in that Dolphins game, late in the game, it's still a close game relatively. Like the Dolphins with a high-powered offense could find a way back. And it's 4th and 1 in their own territory, and they don't even have a second thought about it. They go for it both times. They get it both times. Game over, just like that. So it's just super impressive to me how this Eagles team is formulated from within. They're super strong on both lines. They take over games in the trenches, and that's what wins you games in the playoffs.
With my number 2 pick in the NFL draft, I'm taking the Baltimore Ravens as my number 2 pick.
Wow.
I think, Lamar Jackson over there in the UK and now back at home against the Lions, they've just done a lot. Like you mentioned, Lamar Jackson creeping up into that MVP conversation. And that defense, Lewis, is always going to be great for Baltimore. Their rushing attack is going to be awesome. And as they continue to develop this passing attack with Lamar Jackson more and more, they look like the second best team in the AFC, in my opinion, and the second best team in the NFL.
Yeah, clearly, that's how you feel. And I have the Ravens on here. I don't have them as my number 2 team, Laura. Who is your number 3 team?
That has to be your Philadelphia Eagles, like you mentioned. Okay. Just good offensive line, good defensive line. We also saw they traded for safety Kevin Byard from the Tennessee Titans, so they'll try to lock up, that secondary tries to improve a little bit throughout the season. But like you mentioned, over there in the NFC, talk about a team that has to battle through adversity, right? Jalen Hurts, after throwing that pick 6, goes right back down the field and goes on a touchdown drive. And so we know what they are. Even if they struggle a little bit passing the ball, they're always going to be dominant on their ground game. And so give me the Eagles at number 3.
Yeah, and my number 3 team, Laraib, is going to be the San Francisco 49ers. I think despite the 2 losses in a row, they still just have the most talent in the NFL on both sides of the ball. Well, you mentioned at the start of the pod that defense did look shaky. I think they'll be fine. They'll be better. And then come playoff team, I trust this team. I trust this coaching staff. And let's see with Brock Purdy. Let's see if I can trust him by them. But they are my number 3 team. My number 4 team is the Baltimore Ravens. Echo a lot of the points you made. The only reason I have them below Philly and San Francisco is just they are missing a lot of guys. And this Ravens team just finds a way to get injured every single week. And down the long haul, am I going to be able to trust them? I don't know. But right now they're playing like a top 5 team in the NFL, so I have to give them that respect. So who's your 4?
My 4 is the 49ers. Like you mentioned, Brock Purdy He's the worst quarterback out of the other three teams I had above him. And so of course they've been banged up a little bit too, right? Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams, even George Kittle went out of the game for a little while. And so just a team that gets banged up often too. I think I'll put this 49ers team down here at 4 until I can see some more out of Brock Purdy.
And now, so we pretty much agree. Those top four, in whatever order, were pretty chalk. But the fifth team, I told you what it was before we started, but I've changed my mind since. So I'll go ahead and tell you, number 5 team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, Laraib. They've won 4 games in a row. The only team that's beaten them over the past year, or one of 2 teams that's beaten them over the last calendar year. The Chiefs have beaten them 3 times, once in the playoffs, and then they had that awful game against the Texans in week 2? Mm-hmm. So besides that, this team has gone on a roll. They beat the Bills in London. They had a pretty choppy, but they won the game against Atlanta. And this offense is looking good, but this defense, getting takeaways, finding ways to get their team off the field. I like their defensive line. Some of their defensive backs are really good at just, sticking with their guys. I've been very impressed with them. And Trevor Lawrence is the real deal. And if we do a quarterback ranking sometime in the next few weeks, you'd be surprised where I have Trevor Lawrence right now. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, Jacksonville Jaguars are definitely up there so far. We talked about this early on the season, right? We expected a bigger jump out of Trevor Lawrence, and we're finally starting to see that, a third of the way through the season, Lewis. And so, like you mentioned, that defense is still really young. Josh Allen is playing really well. And so as they continue to develop so far this season, we'll see where that goes. But I just don't think they've ripped off, any great wins besides that Bills game, Lewis. But for my number 5 spot, give me the Detroit Lions. Now, I just said a team that hasn't had any significant wins against a good team. That's also the Lions. But I like Jared Goff. He's been to a Super Bowl before. That offense, of course, they're going to slip up once or twice a year. We saw them against the Panthers last year, just put up a dud. And now it looks like on the road against the Ravens, they put up another one. But still, talk about a young defense and Aiden Hutchinson and Brian Branch. I still think, they're 2 young guys, and they're still going to be the cornerstone of this defense. And just a bad game against the Ravens, but I can still trust them. Of course, in a division that's easily winnable for them in the NFC, which looks like it could be wide open for them still after the 49ers lose. So I like the Lions. Of course, Jahmyr Gibbs, breakout game for him. So go Lions.
Yeah, I mean, it just put way too much of a sour taste in my mouth to lose like that in a game that, wasn't exactly supposed to be a blowout, but we both, one of our few both, picked that game right last week, even though, yikes. Speaking of picking games, Laraib, our final segment here, Thursday Night Football preview. We have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers traveling to Buffalo to face the Bills. Buffalo favored by 8.5. We didn't really talk about Buffalo, Laraib, but they drop a really bad game at home against the Patriots, or on the road, excuse me. And they have not looked good ever since that, that Miami game this season. They lost in Jacksonville. They came back home, had a really weird game against the Giants in which they probably should have lost, you can argue. And then they dropped 2 more here. They're sitting at 4-3 on the year. Now you're going, you're hosting the Buccaneers at home. Why should the Bills be 8.5-point favorites here, Laraib?
I don't think they should be at all. Now, one reason could be that this Buccaneers team played awful last week. Oh my gosh, man.
You can get into that one. I don't want to talk about it.
Picked Baker Mayfield to be, comeback player of the year, just how well he was playing. He just lets me down the past couple of weeks. And in this one against the Bills defense that can be had, Mac Jones looked like a competent NFL quarterback last week. So Baker, please, my brother, this is the week against the Bills. Now, I know you're on the road in a short week, but you still have Mike Evans. You still have Chris Godwin. Just go out there and play some football, man. And so I'm still picking the Bills, though, because Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs is going to tear apart this Buccaneers secondary now. We'll see what this Bills defense can do. They gave up a 2-minute drive to Mac Jones last week. And, they're going to be hungry to go out there and lay the wood on this Buccaneers offense. So give me the Bills. I like the Buccaneers to cover this one. I think it's going to be a close game, but the Bills pull it out of their ass somehow. Give me the Bills 27-24.
You know what, Laraib? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No, I like the Bills in this one too. Simply based off merit. I don't think they're that much better than the Bucs because their defense has just been ravaged by injuries. Laraib. Matt Milano, our guy, Matt Milano, out for the year, and they look awful. You know, the Patriots are really running the ball down their throats last week, and we saw that same thing happen in the game prior with the Bills. So, you know, he's such a key piece of that defense. It sucks to see him go. Thank God the Buccaneers can't run the ball to really exploit that whatsoever. But I don't know. This game's going to be close. I'm going to pick the Bills 23-20. Ugly Thursday night football. There could be more injuries in this one, Rob.
All right. Well, that is going to wrap it up for this episode of the First and Goal podcast. All our social links are down below. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, go ahead and leave them down in the comment section as well. Lewis, anything to say before we head out?
I'm all good.
All right. This is the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.